Good morning. I call to order the meeting of the Board of Directors of Elton Butte Irrigation District for Wednesday, August 28th, 2024. Mr. Garai, would you please lead us in the
Dear Lord, thank you for this day. Send your blessing upon all those gathered here today. Help us make the right decisions and everything involved in our water district and those above us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Robert Russell, would you lead us in the pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all very much. That brings us to the introduction of guests. The first thing I will note is, yes, Mr. Josh Smith, he is the incoming treasurer manager for the irrigation district and was generous enough to join us today. With that, we'll begin with those in attendance in the room.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kirsten Knapp. I'm the senior manager for the Southwest Rivers program at National Fish and Wildlife Foundation.
Good morning, Jenny Dalla, Beer Reclamation. And Jennifer Taylor, Beer Reclamation.
Alfred Peral, part of the Office of the State of New York.
Karen Byron, EBID.
Thank you very much. And Madam Secretary, who do we have online?
Good morning, Mr. President. We have Jennifer Phillips, Jerry Melendez, Rena Romero, Cohen's, Delise Masil, Jane Rice, Dara Hennessy, Kate Maynard, Keith Dinos, Oscar Esparza, and Dr. King.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the item of approval of the minutes. So we have the minutes of August 14th, 2024 in our packet. I note a correction to the water resources report that's in there. It does not note that Dr. Fox was not present at that meeting. So I would like to ask that the first item in that, which says that all members were present, to then include except Dr. Eric Fox.
Another correction.
Right.
At the beginning there where it says James Stone was absent, so was Mr. Tharp.
Thank you.
Other corrections to the minutes of August 14th. Hearing none, I'll accept the motion to approve the minutes of August 14th, 2024 as amended.
I so moved.
Second. I have a motion from Mr. Garai, seconded by Mr. Playshall, to approve the minutes of August 14th, 2024 as amended. Any further discussion? Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The motion passes unanimously. All right, the next item on the agenda is the approval of the incoming treasurer manager employment contract. That contract is in your board packet, and I will turn the floor over to the chair of the Government Affairs Committee, which was responsible for coordination on that contract. Thank you, Mr. President.
We worked with Mr. Polly, Chris Polly, for months. We did a comprehensive job search. Our best candidate was the one selected, and this is the contract we negotiated. We reviewed multiple times with Mr. Lutz, and we have come to an agreement, and I propose that we accept the contract as written.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rocarosa. Mr. Lutz.
And Mr. Chair, just a couple of last minute corrections that I just needed to make compared to what's in the board packet. On section 2.2, I had neglected to have that effective date correspond with what's on the introductory paragraph. It is September 30th. And then in discussions with Mr. Esslinger yesterday, he asked me to substitute SCADA for hydrology and technology on section 2.3B. So the final version should include those kind of slight corrections compared to what might be in the packet.
And so the hydrology and technology change appears to already be the version that's in our packet.
Okay.
No.
All right. Apologize. What am I misreading then?
Hydrology and technology would be replaced by the.
Oh, the other way around.
Thank you.
And, subject to Mr. Smith's approval of those slight corrections, I believe I don't have any problem with this. Final.
Thank you,
version.
Mr. Smith. Notes no objections to those changes. Comments from the board?
Why September 30 instead of October?
That's a Monday.
Yeah.
I seemed odd to have them start on Tuesday.
Gotcha.
Also, October 1st, on his first day, he will be in attendance at the Rio Grande Water Users Conference in Santa Fe. And September 30th is the travel day for that. So having him employed on the travel day will seem wise.
Makes sense now.
Excellent question, Mr. Clayfield. Any others?
Motion to approve.
I have a motion from Mr. Clayshall to approve the contract. Seconded by Mr. Sloan. He stated the contract. So the motion is to approve the employment agreement between Elephant Butte Irrigation District for the treasurer manager position with Josh Smith. Motion made by Mr. Clayshall, seconded by Mr. Sloan. Further discussion? Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? In the chair, the ayes have it. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. I will also note that Mr. Smith is currently employed by the district in this interim period. Is that correct, Mr. Smith?
That's correct.
So that he can attend meetings like this. I will note that Mr. Smith was at my agenda review meeting that I had last Friday, so that he has an opportunity to meet with all the various department heads to start learning the things that will be beneficial to him at the district prior to his start date. So currently, I guess technically, Mr. Smith works with Mr. Esslinger until September 30th.
Is the seat heating up already?
It is.
It gets worse.
Yes, better. Respect. Thank you all very much. That brings us to the approval of the audit contract. Ms. Barber.
Good morning. I do not have a presentation for this audit contract. This is year 2 of our external audit. Same firm, Piero and Piero, as we had last year. And the contract terms and everything is set by the Office of the State Auditor. We are not allowed to change anything, and staff recommends approval.
Thank you very much, Ms. Barber. There is a letter from the state audit office. I'm not used to seeing that accompanying the contract.
That is a letter that we get from the auditor or the state auditor's office that says, yes, we can go ahead and finalize the contract. I'm not used to attaching it.
Okay, thank you. Questions regarding the state audit contract? Hearing no questions, I'll accept the motion to approve the audit contract.
Motion so made.
I have a motion by Mr. Sloan to approve the audit contract. Piero,
I'll second.
seconded by Mr. Garai. Any further discussion? Hearing no discussion is closed. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? In the chair, the ayes have it. The motion passes unanimously. Brings us to item 7, the Coalition of Rio Grande Water Users 2024 Conference, October 1st through the 3rd. Mr. Franzoy.
Yes, this will be the second time they're doing this annual conference. I believe Greg and some of the prior board members were there last year. Very amazing guest list. It's hosted by Chris Pauley and his firm. You have the commissioners Commissioner Camille Tootin from the BOR. You have Wayne Pullen from the regional office. You have the Army Corps of Engineers that will be there. And a lot of other very detailed guest list that goes on for clearly the 3 days. What we'll need from you guys is who do you guys want to be in attendance for this meeting? I believe Josh Smith was referenced. We'll need likely 2 board members, and Joe Paul Lack will be in attendance as he is the speaker on the agenda.
Thank you for that, Mr. Lang.
You're welcome.
So this is an excellent opportunity for us to meet with other interested groups along the Rio Grande. Mrs. Salbeck.
I just want to correct one thing. We are actually the hosts with MRGCD of this event. We were the ones that began the event as part of our collaborative effort with them. Chris Polly is our contactor who helps us set this up, but EBID is the actual host.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification, Mrs. Salbeck. So this year, we are fortunate that the area of folks of interest, the area of interest is expanding now. The area of participation is expanding beyond just the borders of our state. And so this is a very good opportunity for you to interact with other agencies, with other concerned interest groups, to understand the problems that are faced along the Rio Grande, to understand where our problems align and where we can work together to improve the condition for water users along the entire Rio Grande. It is my intention to attend, should the board wish to send me, if there's not excessive interest. I would encourage everyone to attend. How many people are available and interested in attending October 1st through 3rd? I have Mr. Rosa. We know Mr. Lack is attending. So at this point in time, I have 3 board members that are interested in attending. Mr. Franzoy, so we have Mr. Smith, we have Mrs. Salbeck that will be attending. What other staff members?
I'm not sure we can get you more detail then. I would suggest Gary attend. Definitely, and then I can attend as well.
So that would be 3 staff members, legal counsel, and 3 board members?
Correct.
Mr. President,
With Dr. Fox.
I would be keenly interested in attending as well, should it be the will of the board.
Okay,
I'd like to, but I'm gonna be out, I think on the 3rd, so it throws a wrench in.
thank you very much, Mr. Cole.
If that changes, I'll let you know.
Thank you. All right, so I have heard an expression to approve travel for 3 board members, legal counsel, and 4 staff members. What's the will of the board?
I move that we approve, travel for staff members, board members, for all expenses incurred.
Very good. So that's 3 board members, legal counsel, and 4 staff members. To include, and I believe I heard you say to include all actual expenses. Is that the right phrase, Mr. Francois? To include all actual expenses. Second, Mr. Colbert, I'm going to repeat that motion. So we have a motion to approve travel for all actual expenses for 3 board members, legal counsel, and 4 staff members to attend the Coalition of Rio Grande Water Users Conference in Santa Fe, October 1st through 3rd. Any further discussion? Hearing no discussion is closed. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Being the president, the ayes have it, the motion carries. I would like to note that we have a few additional guests that have arrived. We have Ms. Michelle Estrada Lopez from the Bureau of Reclamation. We have Ms. Hannah Risley White from the ISC. She is the current director. And also from the ISC. And I'm sorry, Ron, I don't know your current title.
Lower Rio Grande Basin Manager.
The Lower Rio Grande Basin Manager for the Interstate Stream Commission. Welcome. We have the 69th Annual New Mexico Weary Conference, which is November 4th through 6th. Mr. Franzoy.
Yeah, and I'm gonna touch base on number 9 too, since they pretty much overlap.
Very good.
For the Weary Conference, there's no agenda yet, but we do know it will be held in Santa Fe. Towards the end of that conference, the NWRA conference starts. That will be in Albuquerque, the 6th through the 8th. Ideally, from a planning perspective, you might want to have people overlap. As soon as that one's done, they go over to Albuquerque, but I'm not entirely sure. That'll just depend on kind of who you guys want to attend the meeting.
As, I'll give you a moment, Ms. Salbeck. It is
common for the New Mexico Weary Conference to ask for presentations from Elk Butte Irrigation District. I'm not aware of any currently, however, Mrs. Sullivan.
I would recommend as far as overlap that it be, board members. I typically, we send to the Weary Conference staff like Dr. Fox, Patrick Lopez, maybe Joa. But to NWRA, it will be legal manager, board members. Board members historically have not attended Weary. So if there is an interest, certainly there could be overlap in board members, but we would traditionally have sent two different types of teams to these events.
Thank you, Ms. Salpeck. Reminds me of a conversation this morning. How nerdy are you? You're very nerdy as a board member. You will enjoy attending the Weary Conference. The less nerdy you are, the less you'll enjoy it.
I'm out.
And I'm normally in with both people, so, you know, we've got a good spectrum on our board of directors. Timing wise, I think we have some time to approve travel on that. Mr. Franz, are you asking for us to sort out the travel arrangements for that today?
No, just an update.
Okay,
Well, for the NWRA one, the sooner we know, the better because of early bird registration.
Okay. so. The NWRA conference is in New Mexico. That's a fairly big deal. There was a tremendous amount of lobbying and work done by the New Mexico Agency, specifically Mrs. Salpeck, to get that conference into our state. Showing our appreciation for that by attending it is a good thing. The NWRA conference is a critical conference for governance to attend every year. This is our opportunity to meet with the Commissioner of Reclamation and her key staff, and to discuss, you know, what is working well in our area, to discuss where we see the future heading and how they can help. Looking at the dates, Mrs. Salpeck, Mr. Lutz, help me out with, if I've got 7 board members that are available and interested in attending, what are our potential issues, given that it's a policy conference?
I simply noticed those situations for open meetings like we handle court hearings, for example. We notice it as it's not going to be a board meeting, but there is going to be a quorum of board members being educated on a particular matter. And then you are on.
Very good. So, obviously, there's some timing required for the nose requirements. It's much shorter than the timing we need for the registration, but that is something to keep in mind. If you're like, I can attend at the last minute, that could be a problem. All right, I am interested and willing to attend the Water Resources Association Conference, NWRA Conference. How many people are available those dates? Mr. Roby Rosa? Thank you for always raising your hand, Mr. Roby Rosa.
Greg, what are those dates again?
6th through the 8th, so you're already in Santa Fe, the 4th through the 6th, there's some portion of that.
5th and 7th, isn't it, Mr. President?
No, I'm sorry, no, yeah, you are,
No.
I'm getting the
That's
conference.
October.
Then,
It's
sorry,
October.
I'm getting the conference mixed up, I apologize. Weary is the 4th through the 6th, NWRA is the 6th through the 8th. So that's Monday through Wednesday and Wednesday through Friday, are the 2 conferences.
Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, which one are you wanting to attend, both of them?
NWRA, so I believe that's.
Mr. John, since Gary's not here, we're not all sure on like staff and stuff, should we postpone this until the next meeting?
So
See if we have time.
what's the registration deadline? Anybody know?
We haven't put NWRAs out yet, so that would be fine.
Okay,
We were trying to start for planning purposes because of other things that have to go on our calendar, but I think we can wait.
With our guest here.
very good. It's been suggested by Mr. Sloan that, you know, for informational purposes, we've received the information on these 2 conferences, but that a decision on travel be postponed until our next regular board meeting. He didn't make a motion, but he's suggesting that. Is there any opposition to that? Hearing no opposition, the approval of travel for the Weary and the NWRA conferences is postponed to the first board meeting in September.
Mr. President, I have a question.
Mr. Clayshall.
The NWRA conference, they want early notification. What if you notify for too many and someone can't go? Is anybody gonna have been out of shape about that?
Been out of shape? No, there are going to be costs involved in, like, I don't know what they are. What we register for the conference, is the registration refundable? We book hotel rooms. How much of that reservation has to be paid if you cancel? But there are costs involved. Perhaps minimal, perhaps not, for, having people attend and then not go. It has happened in the past. Things come up, people can't make it to a conference. We would prefer to not do that, just to reduce the cost of the district for things that don't end up providing any value to our board member or our staff. So do you have any comments on that? Okay. Hearing no other discussion on that, we will move to the update from the Bureau of Reclamation Area Manager. This is Jennifer Baylor, and I believe she is also being joined by Hannah Rice-White, Director of the ISC. I welcome you both to our meeting. Thank you very much for being here.
Standing, stand.
Or whatever you want. Whatever you would like. I would encourage you to pull up a chair and both of you sit.
Oops, that's the wrong meeting. There we go. You want to share the screen or already running?
Sure.
Let me start with the presentation. I came prepared for two presentations. I think we wanted to be opportunistic about having the state and reclamation here together. I'm just going to show you what I would have presented in this presentation. And if there's a strong desire to see some of this, I could present it. Otherwise, I would suggest that I come back probably next month to cover all the middle Rio Grande. This is mostly a middle Rio Grande presentation, everything happening above Elephant Butte, which I know you're keenly interested in. Whether that's today or next month, it makes no difference. These are long-term projects, so it makes no difference to me. But I just wanted to make sure you know we had this presentation ready.
I would welcome you every meeting you chose to attend.
Every meeting I chose to attend. It would be an Elvado update. The emergency plug work you may have heard of on the Rio Chama State and Reclamation Partnership.
I'm sorry, can I ask you to talk for a moment? Can
Sure.
we get her screen share?
Yes, I could have done that.
That's okay.
We're
okay.
Teams people, not so much WebEx. Yes, so for
Thank you
folks
very
online, Avado, Rio Chang Settlement Plug, Santa Casia Conveyance Improvements. And then zooming in on the conveyance improvements piece would be realignment, two realignment projects, one completed, one in the works right now. Low flow conveyance channel is a hot topic these days. River Mile 60 is a low flow conveyance channel project, and then our large Lower Santa Casia improvement project. So this is a rather robust presentation. That's why I think it'd be better used in a future meeting when we could just concentrate on this.
Very good. So Ms. Baylor is recommending that we move that to a future meeting. Is there any objection from the board on inviting her back? Hearing none, proceed as you'd like.
Okay, would you like to start, or would you like me to?
Either way.
Go for it.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. Many of you I've met, but maybe not all of you. My name is Hannah Risley White. I'm the director of the New Mexico Interstate Stream Commission, and it's such a pleasure to be with you all today. I didn't prepare any slides or presentation material. But I very much would welcome a future invitation. I'd like to get down here more regularly, and work with our team to prep whatever information you'd like to hear more about. I think primarily my key message to you all is how important this partnership is to us. Interstate Stream Commission sees the work in the Lower Rio Grande as a critical component of what we're confronting as a state, and you all as critical partners in that effort, and the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation as a critical partner in this effort. And so we've been really building our team. I think you all know Ryan Serrano, who's here. I hope that you interact with him regularly. He came to us from the Office of the State Engineer. We've gone in the last year from maybe 2 positions to 5 or 6, working here out of Las Cruces, really dedicated to helping address the challenges that we're facing in this part of the state. We also see that team as very much an integrated team with the Office of the State Engineer, so working really lockstep with our colleagues there. And I'm sure I'll give you a couple of just big picture updates from across the state. But really, I'm sure one of the things that's right in the front of your all's minds right now, and Ryan and Ms. Salopek will be presenting on the cooperative agreement later in your agenda. But I'm sure you're thinking, what's gonna happen with all this money? So I'm just gonna address that right out of the box. I think you all are in a really good position in that there are various and significant pots of money available to address the challenges we're facing down here, both state money, as you all know, we secured over $60 million from the 2023 legislative session for work in the Lower Rio Grande specifically. We communicated with the legislature and the governor's office that we see that as a down payment. We want to show progress in expending that in a productive way so that we can go back and ask for additional funding. And then you have significant federal funding and now USDA funding. And the reality of all of those pots of money is that they all have layers of constraints and different kinds of constraints on all of them. This is where I'm so glad I have really smart staff, including our financial staff, to help us navigate all of those constraints. But the good news is having those various pots of money and the partnership with National Fish and Wildlife Foundation as well allows this group, us collectively, to bring all of those resources to the table like puzzle pieces to fit all of the various needs, understanding the various constraints on those pots of money. And I think my message to you all is that we are very much committed. I'm committed to the concept that being successful in how that money gets on the ground necessarily needs to be driven by you all and your input about where that brings the most benefit. And so we're in this together, and we're very much interested in engaging, as I said earlier, me wanting to spend more time with you all, etc., to figure out what that looks like. How do we bring all of those pots of money to bear in the most productive way for you all and your communities in the work ahead addressing these challenges? To the extent you have questions or concerns about the funding or how all of that works, please do not hesitate to reach out. I may not have all the answers, but as I said, we have a really good team on our end and Reclamation Shop that can help answer those questions. So we are standing ready to work with you all to figure out how to get that money on the ground in the most productive way possible. And then also I'd say, in the Lower Rio Grande, we're really gearing up for a more concerted effort to engage all of the relevant stakeholders in problem solving. The fallowing program, so the groundwater conservation program that Ryan runs, we really see as a bridging strategy. Like, we knew we needed to work to reduce depletions quickly. We stood up that program. We're very much looking forward to input from you all and others about how to improve that program so that we can iterate and make it work better each time. So we're gearing up to engage with you all on that. But we're also really wanting to engage the whole range of stakeholders in the Lower Rio Grande on what the long-term solutions look like. And so that effort is going to be really taking off later this year and into next year. And we welcome you all and others' input on what that process needs to look like, that broader stakeholder engagement. And then I would also just say, a couple of other updates that are more statewide. I think you all heard we have a new state engineer. Elizabeth Anderson was appointed by the governor. She'll still have to be confirmed by the Senate next legislative session. She comes to that role with a lot of experience in New Mexico, and a lot of expertise related to the agency. Mike Hammond, former state engineer, brought her in as his senior advisor over a year ago, so she got to kind of shadow him, including, I think, attending a number of meetings with you all. She will be joining us tomorrow for some conversations with some of you. She's gonna be wanting to spend quite a bit of time down here as well. I'm excited to work with her, and there's a really solid team at the Office of the State Engineer right now. So that partnership between Interstate Stream Commission and Office of the State Engineer is really strong. And then last, I would just comment, I think you all know we've been working on implementing the new Water Security Planning Act, which is the rewrite of New Mexico's regional water planning statute. I think last time I was here, I talked about that briefly. We just concluded holding these in-person open house events across the state, and a web portal where people could provide input. We're waiting on a report from our contractors that will synthesize all of that input. That input will be used to draft rules and guidelines that are called for by the act that essentially create the framework for regional water planning. Moving forward, we'll want additional input once those things are on paper, the rules and guidelines, so we'll be looking to you all to weigh in on that. And I think a lot of the stakeholder coordination effort that I mentioned earlier here specifically in the Lower Rio Grande is gonna end up merging with that regional water planning process at some point down the road. But we recognize that the need to engage in the Lower Rio Grande was urgent, so we wanted to do that as quickly as possible. The rules and guidelines under the new act, we're taking our time with a little bit because we want to make sure we get them right, because we think that framework has the potential to be in place for decades to come. And so I think, I'm gonna look and see if Ryan thinks I missed anything. Those are the big updates from me, and I'm just so pleased to be here and happy to answer any questions, and really glad to be presenting with Jennifer Failer and to have the partnership and working relationship with her office. Thank you.
Thank you very much, very much. Question for Mr. Riley White. That's outstanding.
Anytime, reach out anytime, please. Thank you.
So I want to note how historic the level of cooperation between the federal government, state government, local interests, and the level of funding. And that it's probably a century since we've seen that level of cooperation, that level of funding in our area. And it makes me very hopeful for the future. So I appreciate you working together, you're working with us in trying to, solve or improve the situation with regard to water in our region. Thank you very much. Thank you to all of your staff for their exceptional hard work.
With the last comment, I really appreciate the fact that you said the funding that hits the ground is going to be influenced by what we think is the best money spent for the district. I appreciate that. I do that.
Has to.
That well, it wasn't always that way, but thank you.
Mrs. Baylor's accustomed to me saying, what makes water? What makes water? Let's do that. Ms. Baylor, did you have anything else?
So note to myself, don't let Hannah go first. She's a hard act to follow. Yes, I did have a few comments, really largely reiterating what you just said, Mr. President. It's an exciting time. We're talking about making progress in this basin. It's definitely been stalled for almost exactly 13 years when litigation was first filed and everybody went to their corners. In the last 3 or so years, we've been working together, we've been building those relationships, and I don't think it's a coincidence that the money starting to flow out of all that work. I'm going back to these days. I think it was a century ago, over a century ago, when there was so much cooperation and we could get a dam built and an entire project built, the Rio Grande project. So super exciting time. Couldn't agree more with that. Dollars are coming in. Stepping back, Congress was drafting the IRA when the state of New Mexico and Reclamation and others were working on a settlement for all that litigation.
And it's just really not a coincidence. I know some people would know the backstory. It's all tied up in settlement negotiations, but it's not a coincidence that the state has about $60 million to spend and the Bureau of Reclamation has about $60 million to spend. That came from Congress and the state appropriations, because that all started in several years ago when commitments were made to do exactly what you're saying. Let's work with the district to figure out how to better balance available supplies with consumption. It can't be continue to be a mining operation. That's not a sustainable future for agriculture if we're using more of the resources that are available to grow the crops. So that's what we're here to do, is to find that balance, find the programs that work for everybody. That, as Hannah said, there's restrictions for each of these different pots of money. We're gonna have to follow the rules. The devil will be in the detail, figuring out exactly how the water's gonna work, what project to do. And we've been working on that. Genevieve will be presenting on the drought resiliency team and giving an update there. So we've got a head start. We've been working together, but we really haven't said how exactly are we gonna convert money to reduce depletions and keep farming and ag viable. And we're on the precipice of that. So it's very exciting. I am gonna ask you to forget everything you know or think you know about Reclamation's pot of money. It's been out there for a while, so everybody's been talking about it, and it's probably caused more confusion than answers that it's been given. So let's start fresh today and here on out for what that money really is. As we have it, as we have the structure, we're working on the governance, the MOU and those sorts of things. To just think freshly about that money and forget about whatever we hoped it was or thought it might be. The best example, the best way I could think right now to explain it, again, because we have ideas. We don't agree with the state on how exactly they can work, and we've been working through that. Hey, here's our ideas. State's like, that doesn't meet our laws and our intent. Well, let's figure it out then. And so we gotta have those discussions, because it's not easy. But they're doing it on the Colorado River, so that's where I would point folks to. There's these bucket terminologies that you probably want to go ahead and learn, because they use it all the time on the Colorado River. They've been doing the bucket one for years now. Bucket one was Lake Mead is crashing. We have the rules for Lake Mead. The rules that we have don't work if it gets below a certain elevation. It's busted. The whole Colorado River is busted if Lake Mead got below that elevation. So the bucket one was short-term emergency, pay farmers to use less water, pay tribes to not use their water and run it down to the reservoir. Talk to Mexico about not taking their full allocation. The whole bucket one was keep Lake Mead propped up so it doesn't go below that threshold, and nobody knows how to operate it once it goes below there. So short-term, get water in the reservoir, so fallowing, forbearance, all those tools in the toolbox. The Inflation Reduction Act is what is termed bucket two. And that's where it's a pivot from a 1 year, you fallow, we give you money, water shows up, is used differently, all good. Bucket two is long-term, so that's why it's harder. That's why we're having to figure out state law. Congress's intent for the Inflation Reduction Act. It's not a one-time payment for a one-time savings. It's a one-time payment for it's called long-term in the Inflation Reduction Act. We're saying kind of a 30-year, a generational type water savings. And instead of Lake Mead, it's the aquifer. We have to keep the aquifer propped up. That's what I'm saying. We can't be a mining activity. So how do we do what they did on the Colorado, keep Lake Mead propped up? How do we keep the aquifer at a sustainable level of pumping? But with this money that the state's calling a down payment, we're not sure if we'll be able to get more money, but we do have significant resources right now. We have all the partners in place to do that. So it's sort of long-term water savings to focus on the aquifer. And then the bucket two, there's environmental and there's water. So that's a little nuance in the Inflation Reduction Act is we are able to just spend money on environmental benefit projects. So that's my spiel.
Thank you very much. And you know, I remain excited. And I appreciate that idea of being open to a fresh perspective on how the money will be spent. And not allowing, you know, my preconceived notions to dominate my vision. Mr. Colquitt, how are you?
Doing great, thank you.
Good to see you. In regards to bucket one, you said you all worked with Mexico? Growers or municipalities or both?
Mexico agreed to carry over their water in Lake Mead, so it was a carryover, which is a benefit to
Yes.
them in the long term, because it wasn't allowed before. Largely, it's infrastructure, wastewater projects for them, so it's funding.
The, did the Bureau compensate them financially? Or you just say, hey, don't use your water and it'll get better? How do you all work with Mexico?
I'm not the expert, it's minute 323, I believe, so that
Okay.
they have a compact, they can negotiate minutes, but from what I do know, it was financial, it wasn't paying them for the water necessarily, it's if you do this, well, that wastewater treatment plant that's on the border that we want the water cleaned up to, will pay to upgrade that wastewater treatment plant, so it's things like that.
So
Money
there's some
was
financial benefit.
There's some financial benefit to them,
Okay,
yes,
very good. Thank you.
so if you want a wastewater treatment plant. you gotta
Right, there you
let
go.
EPA know.
Don't pump it in the river, right? I'm just kidding.
And so, and then noting of the minute, that's International Battery and Water Commission.
Okay,
So Commissioner Kenner would be a good person to ask those questions.
okay,
She would tell you all about it.
You'll have opportunities to see her.
yeah, okay. Very good.
I would like to welcome Mr. Romo from Senator Lujan's office. Appreciate you being here. This is a, excellent discussion. We appreciate the senator's efforts in cooperating in working to get this funding in place. And I appreciate you being here as we discuss how do we then take that work and turn it into benefit. Welcome, Mr. Romo. Very good. Anything else? Mrs. Taylor, Mr. Rathaway.
No, we'll be around. I think we're making a couple more presentations and we're around. So if you think of more questions, we'll be here to answer those. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
President. Thank you.
For the next item on the agenda, I hand the floor over to Mrs. Solopek to introduce our guests.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Today we have with us Genevieve Allen with the Bureau of Reclamation and Kirsten Neff with NIFWIF. And again, because we've come so far in all of these discussions and what's happening and who's on first, a lot has changed and evolved. And so they're here to sort of tell you where in process we are and give you an overview of the NIFWIF grant. So what this is not the state's money from the legislature, and this is not the EBID money from USDA. This is the Bureau of Reclamation's money, okay? So Genevieve and Kirsten, I left your presentations on my flash drive right there.
You just. I'm sure you know how to open. No, it's good.
Yeah. The flash drive should be open so you can select which one.
I need to share again.
Yes,
The
please.
screen.
Thank you.
Excellent. So I'm Genevieve Allen. I'm quiet, so I'll stand to project more. I work for the Bureau of Reclamation in the Albuquerque area office, and I supervise our planning group. And I've also been really involved with drought resilience efforts in the Rio Grande project. It's definitely been a pleasure to work with EBID. So I'm going to talk in general about drought resilience efforts, and then I'm going to hand it over to Kirsten to talk a little bit more specifically about the cooperative agreement that we have with them. So, and I'm also going to highlight some key stakeholder collaborations that we have. Did the keys work to advance the slide? Oh, there we go. Perfect. So these drought resilience efforts came through a partnership that we had with EBID, the Interstate Stream Commission, and Reclamation.
And it came out of our combined understanding of the current and anticipated impacts of prolonged aridification to the project water supply. And we noticed that we needed proactive solutions to really address these problems. And there was a lot of willingness of partners in the area to work together. And we also knew that there was an influx of federal funding that was going to become available, including Inflation Reduction Act funding. And we're really able to capitalize on the local understanding of the ongoing watershed and infrastructure problems and potential solutions that folks are aware of. So we have several goals for these drought resilience efforts. So one of which is, of course, building long-term resiliency in the project water supply, improving water management, enhancing wildlife habitat, especially for threatened and endangered species, exploring diverse water conservation opportunities, and really encouraging information sharing between government agencies and project water users. And we'd also like to capitalize on the numerous joint funding opportunities available. And this is a picture of members of the drought resilience team, which is a large stakeholder group really focused on these drought resilience efforts. So the next item that I have is collaborative relationships, and this is really key to these drought resilience efforts. And there's quite a few names, and these are just regular participants of our drought resilience team meetings. There are so many more stakeholders in the area that are critical, and we look forward to engaging with them throughout these efforts. So next I'll move on to a cooperative agreement that we're working on entering into with the New Mexico Interstate Stream Commission to administer Inflation Reduction Act dollars that have been dedicated to Rio Grande project area drought resilience projects for water conservation and ecosystem restoration. So some of the kinds of projects that we'll undertake are holistic watershed health projects, consumptive use reduction, infrastructure enhancement, wildlife habitat, and aquifer recharge. And these will be carried out in close coordination with the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. And we also have a separate complementary cooperative agreement with them as well for projects in the area. So moving on to next steps. So through that cooperative agreement with NIFWF, we awarded a habitat design and monitoring RFP to the New Mexico Water Resources Research Institute. And they're going to lead EBID, the Interstate Stream Commission, Bureau of Reclamation, and NIFWF and other stakeholders through a broad stakeholder collaborative process to identify potential projects and develop project ranking criteria. And we hope to kick this process off mid-December. And the outcome of this process is going to be a prioritized list of projects for implementation. And we're also working on finalizing that cooperative agreement with the Interstate Stream Commission. And we're hoping to take on what we're calling the Rincon Lateral Project, identified as a really beneficial project by EBID staff. And I know that we're waiting on, so we awarded through an RFP as well, or through a directed grant, some money for EBID to assist with this project, but I know we're waiting on the finalization of the MOA between NIFWF Reclamation and EBID for EBID to continue working on that.
Sal, before you move on, my hearing just made me bad. I was thinking you said December and the slide says September for that kickoff.
September. Yep,
September, okay, thank you.
of course. All right, so that's pretty much all I have. We really look forward to continuing to work together. I'll turn it over to.
I had one more question for you, Sal. So you mentioned holistic watershed health.
Yeah.
So that sounds great, but I don't know what it is.
Sure, so there's a lot of different, essentially holistic, there's a lot of different kinds of projects entailed in that. So that can be one rock dams, that can be keystone lining, it can be passive ponding. So projects to really slow down stormwater, capture, recharge the aquifer rather than kind of being wasted in a way.
Thank you.
Of course.
Ms. Allen, can you talk to us a little bit about The Water Research, what is it? Water Resources Research?
Research Institute. Sure, so that's a group at New Mexico State University. And Dr. Connie Maxwell and Dr. Sam Fernald are the PIs on this project. They have a lot of experience in water resource planning and community engagement. So they applied to an RFP that we put out under the NIFWIF cooperative agreement to help us really design project ranking criteria. And since one of their expertise is this community engagement, we really felt like it was a good fit. They're in the area, they have a lot of local understanding, they have partnerships with folks. So we're really looking forward to their help with this process.
Great, thank you.
Of course.
Ms. Bolton, this is kind of a second part to Greg's question. Could you shed some light on the consumptive use reduction projects? Did you have examples of that, or could you dumb it down for me?
So we don't have examples currently.
Or what is one? Tell me that.
Sure, so with Reclamation's pot of, I guess, bucket 2 money, that in the lower basin looks like fallowing projects. It looks like system efficiency projects. So to overall, I guess, result in long-term water savings, essentially. So similar to what Jennifer was talking about.
Okay.
But we haven't really fleshed out that portion of our efforts.
Sure.
So definitely looking for some feedback
From
as
us.
we move forward. Yeah.
Greg, it's something you
Mr. Black.
rotation crops, some use less than others, that would probably be a part of that formula too. PK,
Okay,
because cotton needs less water than alfalfa.
sure.
I'm not saying that's been, put into any kind of a skeleton and muscled out yet, but those kind of things I think are what. And I don't want to speak for you, honey, but
No, I appreciate
things
that,
like that,
Mr.
I
Lake.
think, are part of the things that they'll be looking at the scope of that project.
There's a broad variety of consumptive use
Awesome.
reduction projects and across reclamation.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Allen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We're still on the Zoom? All right, hello, everyone, again, now in person. I'm Kirsten Neff. I'm the Senior Manager for the Southwest Rivers Program at NIFWIF, as we call ourselves. I'm not going to do the NIFWIF 101 this time, since we did that last time I presented remotely. But I do, Genevieve talked about her excitement in working on the Rio Grande project, and I just want to echo that this is a really exciting opportunity for me. I actually did my PhD at University of Arizona with Dr. Maddock of the Maddock groundwater models for the Mesilla Basin. So I've been hearing about this unique place for a while, and I'm really excited to be working with you all and the other stakeholders here, along with the Bureau and the state. So I'm gonna try to be more nuts and bolts about how this is gonna work, this partnership, this reclamation money that we're talking about. So what are our goals specifically for this reclamation money coming through the state and NIFWIF? Our goals are to identify multi-benefit projects that are going to do some combination of these 4 things: reduce damage from stormwater and sediment, increase aquifer recharge from stormwater or other sources, improve infrastructure to manage water, and here comes the NIFWIF perspective, create and sustain habitat for native riparian birds. So so the question is, what are these projects, right? Well, we're gonna be figuring that out together. So the first phase of this NIFWIF led reclamation money is that we're going to have a stakeholder-driven prioritization process. And this is the grant to New Mexico WERI that Genevieve just mentioned. So the first step, we're having this kickoff meeting in September. Following that kickoff, that's the beginning of us brainstorming potential project types. Then we're gonna categorize those project types, you know, are they, what's the type of project you guys were just talking about, the
Yeah.
consumptive, yeah, are they consumptive use reduction projects? Are they sediment transport projects? Are they habitat projects? Or, you know, some combination of those. So we're gonna categorize, okay, what are the different project types we're talking about? Based on those example projects that folks are gonna bring, those ideas that people are gonna bring to our first couple meetings. And then once we've got these different project types, we're going to come up with some parameters that we're gonna use to identify or differentiate between those projects. You know, if NIFWIF is looking at it from a riparian perspective, we might wanna know how many acres of bird habitat would be involved in this project. If we're looking at it from a stormwater sediment perspective, we might wanna know, well, what would be the stormwater storage capacity of this project, or what would be the sediment reduction that results from this project? And once we have those parameters identified, then we're gonna apply those to the projects that we're looking at and say, okay, well, this project, it has the most acres of riparian habitat, it reduces the most sediment contribution to the river, it has the highest stormwater storage capacity, and that's how we're gonna identify this prioritized list of projects that we're gonna have at the end. And that process, like we said, is gonna be led by Weary, who has a lot of local knowledge of the stakeholders and the hydrology of the basin. So they're gonna be bringing together a lot of expertise to apply to this process. Okay, what are our priority projects? And then so we've got some pictures of the potential project types up here. We've talked about the potential for creating off-channel stormwater storage that both recharges the aquifer, but also maybe diverts some of that sediment from the main channel that's causing sedimentation on our on-channel dams. We might be doing dam rehabilitation where there's been too much sedimentation and we need to increase the capacity of that dam to hold water again. We might be doing irrigation infrastructure improvements. I got a picture of a pipe here. We've already identified as a pilot project to get the team working together that we're gonna pipe the Rincon lateral. That also might result in some irrigation efficiency there. Or, you know, it might take less water to irrigate. We'll see when we do the project together. And then what Genevieve mentioned about that holistic watershed health. Here's an example of one of those one rock dams. In this presentation, I'm calling it upper arroyo restoration for sediment retention. The idea that a lot of the sediment source in this basin is coming from those high arroyos. And if we can keep the sediment up there in the arroyos and not in the main stem of the channel, then we can keep our dams from sedimenting too fast. So that I just put those up for some visuals of, you know, what are we talking about here? And up in the upper left there, you can see some lovely potential bird habitat adjacent to this recharge pond. So seems like multi-benefit to me. And then so phase one, the stakeholder-driven prioritization, project identification and prioritization process, we're just barely starting it, right? That's going to take until next year to kind of get this list. And then in phase two, it's all going to be about, okay, picking and choosing off our list the projects that we're going to implement. And when I say picking and choosing, what I mean is just because this is project one and this is project three, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to go down the project in that order. It may, because if our top four projects are all sediment retention, stormwater retention ponds, we may get to a point down the line where, oh, it seems like we've really probably done enough of those right now. You know, maybe it makes more sense to focus on a dam rehab right now. My point being is that just because at the end we're going to have this prioritized list doesn't mean that we can't adaptively manage for new information or new situations as we go down the line, actually making these projects happen. One of the key things that's going to be part of that project implementation is the NEPA and compliance. So we recognize that things like NEPA and SHPO compliance can really hold up projects like this, right? So as soon as the most recent pulse of money comes from reclamation to NIFWIF, we're gonna be putting out an RFQ for our contractor to be our NEPA and compliance coordinator, so that we have somebody on board whose job is gonna be making sure that gets done in a timely manner, so we can get these projects done. And then the implementation may also include most of the money is gonna be going to EBID or the state for the actual implementation of the projects, you know, hiring the contractors that are gonna do the earthwork, for example. But there may be a potential down the line that NIFWIF would run an open RFP for watershed groups, NGOs who might want to, might have projects, ideas, want to volunteer to do these things like One Rock dams up in the high watershed. And then my final slide here is the where is the money going slide. This is the money that we currently have in hand at Reclamation. Reclamation is going to be seeking additional funding for the to support this effort going forward. But right now, what we have is the big $60 million from the Inflation Reduction Act, which you've heard. Reclamation has that money set aside. You also heard about how the Inflation Reduction Act section that talks about this bucket 1, bucket 2, it's really honestly is focused on the Colorado River, right? They take all the oxygen out of the room. And for that reason, there's a bit of there's a large focus on states. So the way the Inflation Reduction Act language was written is the money basically has to go through the state. And that's because of the politics going on over in you know, Colorado, Arizona, Nevada. Those states want to have control over what their share of the money is doing. Which is why we're really grateful to partner with the state to be the recipient of that IRA funding here. That IRA funding is then going to get split off largely to NIFWIF, and then most of our money is going to go to EBID. And the benefit of EBID being the recipient of our money is that we're easier to work with and more flexible in terms of getting amendments out, getting payments out. So I hope you will enjoy working with us in that respect. Some of the funding may also go directly from the state for implementation. Once we have that list of the priority projects, and we're moving to implementation, the question is going to be who makes the most sense to manage the subcontracts to actually get the dirt moved on the ground. Now, if it's an EBID site, obviously EBID makes the most sense. If we're working on a part of the Rio Grande project that's not an actual EBID managed site, it might make more sense for the state to actually manage the subcontractors who actually build the project and get the work done. And then there will also be some funding that goes from NIFWIF to our grantees and subcontractors, so that that includes that NEPA compliance support contractor I described. That includes New Mexico Weary, who will be running the stakeholder process, and perhaps some direct grants to those watershed groups if we're looking to do that upper Arroyo sediment management work. I've got reimbursable up there several places. That's because all of these grants, including the funding coming to NIFWIF, is all on a reimbursable basis. So you spend the money, or we all agree how we're going to spend the money in the grants and contracts. People spend the money, they say submit a payment request, this is what I spent the money on, NIFWIF then pays them. We turn around to the state or Reclamation and say, this is what we paid people out for, you know, pay us back. There is one other arrow that's important to mention there. You'll see the 1.5 million, and it's hard to see because it's turned on its side, appropriated. And that is because in addition to the 60 million in IRA that's going to the state initially and then through the rest of the flow chart, there's some money coming directly to NIFWIF from USBR that is from their appropriated funding. So that's not IRA money. Therefore, it can come directly to NIFWIF. And that money is a little more flexible than the IRA funding. And that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Neff.
Yes.
Mr. Clayton.
Dr. Neff, I'm gonna give you an example where the river hits the road. I've got a farm about 20 miles south here, so against the west side.
Yeah.
There's a dam up there and a retention pond, and I went and look at it several years ago, we had some bad shape. That's only a question of time. Sure enough, got a big storm, flow right pushes sediment all over me and my neighbors, everybody else. Man, okay, not a problem. I'll run the dozer up there, I'll plug that baby up, we'll fix the problem. Then I found out what happened to his family. When they did that, I wouldn't take a dozer close to it. So Dan just sits there. I talked to Donnie and a flood commission, the impression I got out of boys, he come work every day, sitting at the desk, just making it to retirement. He ain't gonna do anything for you. But I'm not asking government for a dime. I would fix it. But I'm not looking for a lawsuit. Either. I'm not looking for a fine out of EPA like they got. So that, I mean, I guess I'm just trying to say there's some obstacles to work around to get this done.
Yeah, I think, so one thing that I have on my slide, but that I didn't mention was one of the ranking, or one of the criteria that we consider is what is the O&M plan on these dams? I also think that's something that needs to go into the design, right? A lot of these dams in this part of the state are very old, put in by NRCS in what, the 40s, 50s. And thankfully, engineers have figured out how to do this stuff better since then. Engineers and hydrologists, because now we have experience in Arizona and other states on managed aquifer recharge systems, where we know the kind of substrate we need to put at the bottom of the holding pond to actually get that water to recharge and to better manage sediment that does build up. So while I don't have, you know, all the answers or the answer for that specific case, but absolutely that's something that we're going to be considering in the feasibility of these projects is what's the long-term plan for maintenance, who's responsible, how are they going to fund it? And let's design these better in the first place so that they don't sediment up so fast.
In my own case, I'm told that dam ever breaches after you fix it, you're gonna get sued.
Mhm.
Well, I'll deal with the cleanup instead.
Yeah, well, you know, that's, yes.
Mrs. Albeck.
Internally, we have already looked at that as one of our primary hotspots because of EBID's capacity in that area. We have trouble accepting the storms off of that mesa. Obviously, you're aware of that. So what we've been doing is making sure we have the right people at the table. This room actually isn't that group of people, Doña Flood Control, but also BLM. And so we've been engaged in conversations with BLM, IBWC, and some of the actual landowners on the ground in that area to start adding those types of projects to our quote unquote internal list that we will then work with the rest of the team to identify. So the team's sitting here saying we want to coordinate because we know where our system blows out. We know where we flood homes. We know where we have those kinds of problems and they can't be fixed currently because of some sort of issue. So that's why inputting that knowledge into them to then let us figure out, do we repair the dam or do we breach it and create a stormwater capture pond lower down the road and settle the dam, settle the water out and then get it into EBID system in a different way than using that dam? Lower maintenance costs at that point. Will that actually work though, given the amount of sediment coming off of those mesa areas? Who studies that? Whose property is it? All of those questions will be vetted in this next year as we're prioritizing the projects, because we might have a great project, but if it's owned by, say, a private land developer and the price tag is $100 million to sell us the property, on about our day we go, right? But if we have a couple of other projects elsewhere that we can go to, maybe lower on our list of priorities, we will have already theoretically vetted those for everybody to just select and move forward with.
Thank you, Mrs. Saul. Thank you, Mr. Copeland. It's good to see you again, or I guess in person now.
Yeah.
With some of these funds, would we be able to maintain or service the PL 566 dams? Because if I understand correct, that's Army Corps of
I will
Engineers.
not to call you out, but I have Mrs. Baylor shaking her head.
Money's money, right?
O&M on a dam?
No,
No way.
not on the PL 566.
Yeah, the key thing is these projects have to hit multiple of these criteria. Yeah,
Okay.
they can't just be one.
Now, who owns and maintains the riparian bird sites once established?
Well,
Who
they'll be,
owns that water?
Negotiable, all of it.
To be negotiated.
To be negotiated? Okay,
yes.
okay.
I don't expect there to be any land transfers that happen as a result of the habitat work, you know, if it,
But like, let's say little Johnny
yes.
goes for a swim and never comes out.
Well, I believe that would be the landowner, I mean, the actual so these riparian sites don't necessarily have standing water. They're riparian trees that reach the groundwater. That's why it's key to bring the groundwater table back up, is because these riparian gallery forests where the
It's
birds
not a
live.
pond. It's a little
No.
natural or.
Wetland
Yeah.
host.
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
Kirsten, your ability and your contracts to do O and M for a period of time, you had an example previously, I've heard you say.
Yeah, I mean, NIFLIP is honestly pretty flexible with this. We've made payments for all kinds of groups doing projects where it's a payment for future maintenance.
Okay.
I have one example of a group, there's a different program I work on, a desert tortoise program. And one of the things that's a threat to the desert tortoise is people creating new off-highway vehicle trails throughout the desert, breaking up their habitat. So one of the things the BLM is doing is, trying to close those routes. They try to restore the native vegetation so it doesn't look like a road to people. But there are people who are out in the desert on a regular basis and know, oh, that's a road. BLM might have closed it up, but I know that's a road, so I'm going to drive through it anyway. So they have to keep going back and kind of doing this over and over again to make it stick. And we've given groups lump sums of money that they can then invest in an interest-bearing account for the O&M over time on those.
Okay.
Because we're just in this first stage of getting the award agreements in place, I haven't delved that deep into what would be the case here, but at this point, I don't have any reason to believe we wouldn't be able to include a payment like that as part of our grant making.
I got a couple more. You good?
We are, Mr. Copeland.
NEPA, what is NEPA?
It's the National Environmental Protection Act. So it's anytime any federal money is spent, there has to be a review to make sure that the project and the money being spent is not going to cause damage to an endangered or threatened species. That's on the federal endangered or threatened species list.
Okay. And on the last slide, if I'm correct, but I could be not, EBID would first put up the money on these projects and then essentially turn in our receipts and then we'd get reimbursed.
Yes.
Okay.
But it's it's a 2-week turnaround.
We get paid within 2 weeks, or
Yeah.
EBID gets paid within 2 weeks?
Yes, from the time you submit the invoice to the time
Okay.
the money arrives, yeah.
All right.
And I
Or
believe
maybe the
for
money is
very high dollar projects, we do have a workaround for that if EBID doesn't have cash on hand.
What's a
for
workaround?
that. I believe that's where you guys can pay the money forward.
We do have,
Yeah.
yes, we do have, we can make advances. There has to be a strong justification for why we're advancing federal money.
Okay.
But typically, most grantees we work with, they're doing the work and immediately, submitting for reimbursement. There's unlimited times you can submit for reimbursement, right? So you buy a pencil this week, you can ask for reimbursement on that immediately. You hire a cement contractor the next week, you can ask for that immediately.
In what other water districts or conservation districts has NIFWIF worked with? Or is it
MRGCD.
MRGC?
Yeah, we've been working with, doing a similar thing with MRGCD for the past 7 years.
Wow, okay. Thank you.
And I'm sure we have more examples and we do a lot of work actually in the Columbia River Basin, Oregon, Washington.
Okay.
On in-stream flows. So I think we work with some irrigation districts up there
Okay.
and in the Klamath as well, though I don't manage those programs personally.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Copeland. Mr. Black.
Yeah, thank you for being here. The thing that I'm interested in is when we have those priority projects, and as they come in, they start listing. How much credit do we get for numbers that are already established? Maybe not exactly in that place, we pull a composite out of a load of chili, and if we find something wrong, then we go back to lot and back down to the box. So in that example, and you have something that kicks the whole project out.
Yeah.
We then go to a place where, for example, we have a farm up there where there was not one duck, not one deer, not one big herd of quail when we started up there 40 years ago, the day when the ducks fly off that chili that we feed our cattle, it turns the sky blue.
Yeah.
So we got tons and tons of numbers that we generated. Can we take those numbers, because it's a holistic project,
Mhm.
and use those to help those places if we get a priority that's not quite there on numbers and things like that?
I think we could, and what I would say is I think we should try to include those parameters before we even make the list, right? You know, so we all know that it's a lot easier to get a project done that's less of a lift, right? If you say you've got 2 dams you need to rehab, one's smaller and maybe is less than it. One's much bigger and more complicated. Maybe there's multi-jurisdictional ownership around. Like, obviously, the smaller one is an easier lift. So we could take that into consideration. If the habitat in general, there's already riparian habitat on a property, and what we're talking about is either just sustaining that or maybe slightly expanding it. That's going to be an easier lift than looking at a bare piece of ground with no riparian habitat existing. And creating some. So I absolutely think that's something that we should incorporate into the prioritization process from the beginning, is what's the lift on the habitat here?
Well, in the name of goodwill, EBID and several of us have put these projects together where we have a very active habitat that really has increased numbers that you're looking at. We've already done that to a large extent.
Yeah.
Up and down the whole corridor. And I was just wondering how much credit we get for some of that in a place where maybe one, because like you say, you're gonna have a priority call.
Mhm.
When that call comes in, if it's a little short on numbers, that's normally where it's at, by the way.
Yeah.
Could we transfer some of these other goodwill projects to help that out? And I want you to consider that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I will.
Thank you very
Other questions for Dr. Neff? Mrs. Saltek?
I want to clarify what Joe Paul's talking about is we have already done some restoration habitat that have not been dedicated to either IBWC or to a safe harbor agreement. So if we pipe a project and then we have a restoration site attached to that and we come up short on that site, we have the potential for either individually with farmers that we've coordinated with or with EBID to dedicate pieces of ours that already exist to help bring those numbers up.
And coincidentally, it's right next to our first project.
So what I would say is that,
You're welcome.
so what I would say is that this is a proactive program. We're not giving anybody credits or, you know, so ultimately, it does matter to us whether a project is improving or creating habitat. I do think that we will absolutely accept that if habitat already exists and some part of this project is going to ensure that habitat stays as good as it is, that absolutely qualifies it as a habitat sustaining project. But we're not doing anything like,
We don't have quotas or things.
yeah,
that we
we're not
have.
trying to meet anything. We just want to see a benefit from these projects.
And we'll be taking them on a tour to that.
Yeah, well, I just think it makes sense all of that. You know, there's farmers for years that took every roadway out, and you know what we did up there is make it a 20-foot buffer along the river. And before it was 3 foot. We've got all kinds of wildlife, sometimes too much. But we've done that already, and I don't know where you get credit for that in any of these projects, but it would be something that you ought to be able to use in your, you know, in your cards of, you know, things that are beneficial
Yeah.
to that project. Because those numbers are there. It's not just pie in the sky talking, you know, they're already there and they've been proven. So both projects, I think, can gain us something, I hope.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Black. Other questions for Dr. Neff? I just have a final comment. Every time you present to us, Dr. Neff, I have a much better understanding
Good.
of how our partnership works. And so I appreciate your time here today. I hope that you'll come back frequently. I'm sure that my board, for the opportunity to ask you questions, is better understanding and more comfortable with how all of this is going to work to the benefit of our members.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Saltek, do we have anything additional on this agenda?
No, so, you know, we had been talking about broad brushstroke issues, with the opening, discussion this morning. So that would have been what item 10 from Jennifer and Hannah. And then we narrowed into one portion of that broad umbrella which was handled by Genevieve and Kirsten. So now we'll move on to another portion, but this is still not all there is to everything. So
Thank you. So that brings us to the presentation regarding the Interstate Stream Commission and Elk Irrigation District's cooperative agreement and request for delegation of authority to the manager. So whose agenda item is this? Mrs. Solbeck?
So this agreement is in your board packet. It was taken to the Interstate Stream Commission last week. 2 weeks ago. Sometime prior to today. And we spent, essentially, Ryan Serrano and I spent the summer looking at this draft and improving upon it internally so that it could go to our respective boards and commissions. Because of protocol, it goes before the state agency before it comes to us. Just in case they have some sort of issue with it, we don't get out ahead of our state and federal agencies. So my understanding, and I'll let Ryan take it from here, is that the Interstate Stream Commission did approve this with a delegation of authority to Hannah to allow her to complete the agreement. We are requesting the same thing, delegation of authority to the treasurer manager, but overall approval of the agreement, subject to minor sort of cleanup changes. We want this to be very flexible. It is a very broad document. It says we're gonna work together, right? I mean, it's very broad. This does not bind anybody to anything specific other than saying we intend to continue to work towards what you've just heard. So Ryan, why don't you take it from there?
I will also note to the board that I don't think you've seen, I don't think we've had another MOU. As MOUs go, or MOAs, or whatever this agreement is, this one's relatively short. They're roughly 2 to 3 times this, so. Mr. Serrano, welcome.
Good morning, Mr. President, members of the board. It's a pleasure to be here with you all this morning, and I thank you for your time and attention. You'll have to forgive me, I'm not as polished a presenter as my colleagues back here. So I'll be reading from a few of my notes if that's okay. And I'm realizing I'm at the end of the agenda for a reason, because I have a specific ask, so that was pretty intentional. As we move forward through the conversation, I ask you to please refocus your mind, like Sam was saying. We're not talking about IRA dollars, we're talking about state appropriations with this agreement. $65 million, that's split up between 2 different pots. And I always get this wrong, $30 million capital appropriation.
30 capital.
$30 million capital appropriation and $35 million special appropriation. Not all of that money will be dedicated through this agreement. A good portion of it will, because we have other initiatives we're moving forward with those funds. So this cooperative agreement is made between the New Mexico Interstate Stream Commission and the Elephant Butte Irrigation District. This agreement will be entered into for the purpose of establishing a cooperative effort between EBID and the NMISC. This will address substantial interest and a pressing need for emergency, short-term, and long-term water management operations within the Rio Grande Basin. That's intended to improve water management for ops, provide river channel capacity for flood control purposes, and to improve water conveyance for the Rio Grande Compact Administration. We collectively envision this agreement working in the near term towards establishing programs that will support water users and conserve water in the LRG by allowing for collaborative efforts through separate funding agreements geared towards planning, design, construction, equipment purchases, and leases to address emergency short-term and long-term goals, like I previously stated. In negotiating this agreement with staff, we've established a strong working relationship with the leadership and the staff at EBID, and we're prepared to hit the ground running with several proposed programs and projects. And I'll just list a few for you guys, okay? We're looking to stormwater infrastructure and deferred dam maintenance. I think that gets at some of the questions we had earlier. Dam risk assessments, emergency action plans associated with dams. That's a big critical component for our Dam Safety Bureau, and it's something that a lot of the old dams in this area are lacking. So we've identified that as a priority issue. Drain maintenance within the irrigation district. Sediment removal. And hopefully that will include some sediment removal in the channel. We have some work to do there, but in my mind, that's a critical component. And also metering and measurement. And I'll also add, there's a data sharing component in there that Joe and I have talked quite a bit about. It's important to note that we presented this cooperative agreement to our commission, like Samantha said, on the 15th of this month. And we received near unanimous approval to delegate the authority to the director to enter into this agreement. I say near unanimous because we did have one abstention from the vote. That was our local representative to the commissioner, Commissioner Carrasco. I think you all are familiar with Greg. Even though he did not vote because of his interest in this area, he did express, he made a statement that I think is important. So he expressed that, this basically gave broad support for this agreement and noted that it's pretty significant and historic given kind of our collective histories, right? We haven't always seen eye to eye on a lot of these things. And like you've heard this morning, we're at a tipping point in our history. And we're really looking to these agreements to be the springboard from which we can make major change. And that was a sentiment from Mr. Carrasco, and I certainly share his sentiment and his vision. And with that, Mr. President, I'll stop my comments and I'm happy to stand for questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Serrano. We'll go ahead and start with Ms. Saul, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. So a few things to notice in this agreement, like Ryan covered, it's very broad. It goes in just very high level to essentially almost everything you do with EBID other than managing personnel. So this agreement will give us the opportunity to work with the state in a variety of different ways. And if not with the state, we're already working on some of this stuff otherwise. So for example, Ryan mentioned channel maintenance. We have coming before you soon, hopefully in addition to the NIFWIF MOA, we will have a sediment maintenance MOA with IBWC also. So where we can't get it done with one or multiple, we're making sure we have a bunch of avenues open to us. And again, this is very broad and it's also very short for a reason. It is simply foundational. From here, different things will take off in the form of different agreements. So keep that in mind as we go on to this. And then this, the way this agreement is drafted is incredibly favorable to allowing us to partner with other people and bring them into the fold, not necessarily in a direct way in this MOA, but through other third-party agreements that may help us to sort of deploy some of the money. So say, for example, we identify a project where we want to work with the state's money and with EBID's money, but also with the NIFWIF money. You may see more contracts come before you to cross-match all that money because what we're working on is figuring out, like Hannah said, the puzzle pieces. And right now, if you could see the spreadsheet we're operating to show what all those puzzle pieces are, it's pretty complex. So just broad overview issues.
Thank you, Ms. Saul. Thank you. Mr. Roby Russ. Thank you, Mr. Serrano. The state funds, are those completely separate from funds that the BUR will be sending to ISC, or are those same funds?
Separate.
Separate, totally separate. So what is the difference between, I know what a capital appropriation is, what's a special appropriation?
I'll look to my director to help clarify that, but my understanding is there's specific language in the special appropriation that directs how that fund is supposed to be used. It's non-reoccurring. It's a one-time appropriation, and we did get an extension on that to take us through the end of FY 27.
It's 8, yeah.
28.
That's correct, Ryan. And then I would just say capital money needs to be expended on something that has a real property value, like a piece of infrastructure or some interest in something. The special has a lot more flexibility around what we can expend it on.
So it could also be capital.
You can use the special for real property interest, but you can use it for more programmatic activities potentially that bring some benefit to the state, right?
Thank you. And if I may, so that would include potentially studies that go before capital projects?
Correct.
And Are those studies, can you use capital appropriations to conduct those studies prior to capital outlay? Or do you have to use the special appropriation for that?
I would say I'd use this special to be, there's just capital funding at the state level has many more layers of constraints. I was talking about the constraints earlier on what it can be expended on, and special is a lot more flexibility and maybe that.
Our specific request when we helped ISC and OSC get this money was to split it out so that most of it would go to the special appropriation so that we had a lot of flexibility in how to deploy it. Capital outlay is very difficult to work with. The special appropriation included broad language that essentially could even let them use it to litigate against us, for example. But it's very broad language that allows us to deploy it essentially however we see fit, as long as we're cooperating together.
Thank you, Ms. Saltek. Thank you for yielding, Mr. Roper. So these funds, are they specifically for Lower Rio Grande, or is this for ISC in general across the state?
The capital appropriation is for the Lower Rio Grande. The special had language that included the Colorado River Basin, so that special covers both the Lower Rio Grande and the Colorado River Basin. To date, I think our program down here is kind of the driving force in expending those funds right now.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Clayville.
Brian, good morning, good to see you.
Good to see you too.
2D, does this agreement allow for ISC and EBID to coordinate on monitoring water usage, Lower Grande, Rio Grande, including information data sharing? And as I read that, it allows either agency to give information data to the other, but does not mandate it. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
That's my understanding. Yes, sir.
Mr. Roverosa. Thank you, Mr. President. So how will the projects be decided for this funding? Is it going to be similar to the funding that's being created BOR and IFWIT?
So really, in my mind, I envision this being a little simpler than that process. Through this cooperative agreement, what we'll do is we'll work directly with staff to identify projects of need and importance. And then that will go through kind of an award process. So we'll do a work order, scope of work and a work order that allows us to encumber the funds. And then from there, we can start working on actual deliverables for that project.
Okay, with regard to the cooperative agreement, why was Mr. Carrasco, did he vote against it or did he just not vote?
He abstained because he has interest in the Lower Rio Grande.
I understand, okay. So do you have a timeline that you need to meet? And is this a hurdle to meeting that timeline on any issues?
Not that I can think of as I sit here today, Mr. Rovirosa, but I think it's important for us to move forward as quickly as possible, right? We want to show diligence in securing these agreements and expending the funds, like Director Riley White said, so that way we can go back to the legislature and show that we've made significant advancement in deploying the funds. So that way we can ask for more, hopefully, in the near future.
Would it, we have a board meeting in 2 weeks. Would it cause you any troubles if we approved it then instead of today, so that I can take this and talk to constituents around the valley?
I don't necessarily see an issue with that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Roverosa. I have questions for Mr. Serrano.
Rafa, why do we need to discuss it further, in your opinion?
Before we get into discussion amongst the board, just want to be sure there are any more questions for Mr. Serrano.
Yeah, you bet.
Any more questions for Mr. Serrano? Hearing none, we'll bring it back to the board. Mr. Lang.
Well, what's your big concern about funding today?
The concern isn't necessarily with the agreement. It's just that I want to hear from my constituents. But in general, I think the agreement, it's great. I think that it's very broad and that in general, it's going to be just fine. And so, if I can help clarify for the ISC, my board's only had a few days to see this based on our packet creation and our notification period. And as was appropriate, we hadn't seen it prior. And so the question of wanting to be sure. Mr. Rowley expressed an interest in wanting to be sure he understands the implications of this and that there isn't something that he is missing. I agree with Mr. Rosa in the desire to get as much input as we can on these types of historic agreements. I find my time rather covered up, so my ability to do that is quite limited, but I encourage our board members to do that and understand his request. And particularly the importance of not slowing down your process. Should this board choose to delay 2 weeks of approving this?
Yeah, Greg, back to the deal. I mean, we're a board of directors that makes decisions, nothing against what you do, Rafa, but things like this, I've been talking to our constituents for 2 years. And I know you haven't been on board for 2 years, but to me, when we get to this place right here, this is where we make a decision. And again, I think it's up to everybody else to talk right here. If they want to make a decision, they can. If they want to wait, they can. But as for me, I don't see a problem in going ahead and giving him a green light today. What does everybody else think?
Thanks, Mr. Lack. Mr. Sloan?
I got the document yesterday afternoon. I'd like to board.
Thank you, Mr. Sloan. Mr. Colquitt, okay. Other comments from the board?
If it's not a problem for them, then 2 weeks is fine.
I am receiving a gesture from Mr. Isley White that it is fine to wait for 2 weeks, that they don't have an issue with that. What is the will of the board? Wait.
Depends on which finger you give this place. I think that was a favorable gesture.
I think it was. So that means I need a motion to approve or a motion to postpone or something else.
Motion to postpone.
I second. I have a motion for Mr. Sloan to postpone the approval of the cooperative agreement until our first September board meeting, seconded by Mr. Colquitt. Did I understand that motion correctly? Correct. Mr. Lynch, is a motion to postpone debatable?
I don't believe so.
All right, there's a non-debatable motion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
So very good. I need to verify, we're taking a roll call. Mr. Garai.
Hey, I,
Mr. Lack.
Nay.
Mr. Sloan. Aye. Roverosa, Mr. Clayshall.
Aye.
Mr. Colquitt. Aye. Mr. Ludwig.
Aye.
All right, I have six in favor, one opposed. The motion carries. The opposing vote is from Mr. Lack. So we are postponed. We have postponed this item until our September board meeting, which is 2 weeks from today. And I expect this board will take action on it at that time. Thank you, Mr. Serrano, very much for the presentation.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan.
This is public record now, right?
That's correct.
We're out here in the open.
All right, brings us to our water resources report. We have one item on that. You're over. All right, it is the last, so the committee had its last meeting. I will leave the details of that meeting to the written report that's in your packet. The last piece was the committee will meet again September 18th to discuss the water transfer policy and the release date policy. Those were two items that had been referred to the Water Resources Committee at the start of the season to be reconsidered after this water season. So the committee's goal is to have written policy recommendations for the board by the end of October. There are no current recommendations to the board. Are there questions on the Water Resources Committee report? Hearing none, that concludes our open session agenda. Are there any other items of business? Like something I missed? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion to go into closed session.
Move to go into closed session.
I have a motion for Mr. Roverosa, seconded by Mr. Colquitt to go into closed session. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? To the chair, the ayes have it, motion passes unanimously. We are in closed session.